Okay. Next up, we have Rob McWilliam from JISC. And I noticed looking at Rob's LinkedIn thing that you have recently been trekking in Nepal.
Oh, no, I haven't, but I liked somebody's post who was trekking in Nepal.
Okay, right. Well, you knew someone who went
like
trekking in Nepal.
Great idea.
Okay, and Rob's going to talk about customer-centric innovation.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, thank you very much for inviting me to speak with you today. Yes, good afternoon. Congratulations on the catchy acronym. I guess I'm probably not the first person to mention that. At Amazon, we had a lot of acronyms. And in fact, we had to set up something called the Amazon Acronym Central to capture all of the 600 plus acronyms that were used across the organization. And you know, the first entry in the Amazon Acronym Central was the Amazon Acronym Central, the AAC. But I am planning to talk to you today about customer-centric innovation and renewal. As you can see, I am from JISC. I should say that I am a trustee of JISC alongside a number of roles that I have of the sort of non-executive and advisory type since I left Amazon earlier this year. My executive career consisted of three organizations. I was at BAS, leisure organization, for my first 6-7 years of my career, then 16 years working for Asda Walmart, and then the last 4 or so years working for Amazon. Now, as I hope you will see from my presentation, starting with the question why is all important in business. So what is my purpose in being here today? Why am I here? Well, I hope to share what I have learned, particularly from Amazon and Walmart, in implementing customer-centric transformation. The mind shift that's needed to do that isn't complicated, but because we are hypnotized by how things have gone before, it is that collective behavioral change that is the tough bit. But more about that later. So I am incredibly fortunate to have sat on the UK board for the 2 largest retailers in the world. Actually, there's a lot of luck to that. I joined Walmart because I joined Asda when Asda was, in 1997, the number 4 grocery retailer in the UK, but thanks to being bought by Walmart in 1999, I then had 14, 15 years learning all about Walmart. And I joined Amazon in 2012 when they were the 9th biggest retailer in the world, but thanks to that 19% compound growth since then, they are now number 2. I mean, Walmart particularly, at over $500 billion of revenue, it oscillates as number 1 and 2 in terms of all companies in size, depending on the oil price. And you don't get to be that size, and you don't get to grow at 19% compound growth rate without doing something right for customers. Walmart started as a household products chain, relatively small stores, limited assortment in Midwest America, and of course are now over 10,000 stores in 28 countries, vast stores, tens of thousands of products. They're also in the top 5 e-commerce retailers. Amazon, as you'll know, started in books. This is the first website. It didn't even have a search bar on it. But of course now Amazon sells in the UK alone well over 100 million products. And that's, of course, on top of all sorts of devices like Kindles and Echoes, and being a provider of cloud services to hundreds of thousands of businesses. The point here is that these businesses have never really had transformation programs as such, because they've been in a permanent state of transformation. They have needed to constantly reinvent themselves to get from where they started to where they are now. So I have learned over my time with Walmart and Amazon that there are 4 themes that I believe enable these organizations to succeed as they have and to be in a transformation flow state. So the first of those is that they start with why. They have a compelling and meaningful purpose. They have a clear set of values that creates a sense of identity that helps them attract and retain some of the very best talent. The second is that they are relentless in listening to customers. They're agile and open to course correcting if appropriate, and they build and retain customer trust at all costs. Thirdly, they are world-class at execution, and they maintain an incredibly high quality bar in that execution, insisting on the highest standards. And finally, as I said earlier, they have continuously reinvented themselves on behalf of the customer. Now, actually, I think innovation is about all 4 of those themes. It's only by having a clear purpose that you have a goal to strive for on the innovation. It's only by having world-class execution that you're able to take something that you've proved the concept and proved unit economics and be able to scale it to achieve its potential. Now, one of my favorite Jeff Bezos quotes is this one. Good intentions don't work, mechanisms do. And when he talks about this, he uses the example of the Japanese automotive plant, where there is a good intention of improving quality, but then there is also a mechanism. And that mechanism is called the andon cord. And it's when the production line worker sees a defect, they immediately pull the cord and it prevents that defect flowing downstream. It's very effective. But if another retailer or another organization looked at those 4 themes and said, this is what we're going to do, that wouldn't be very effective unless they had the mechanisms that sit beneath it. For example, you could easily say, lots of organizations will say they intend to be innovative. But unless they have a mechanism for surfacing that innovation and nurturing it, then they're unlikely to go very far. So as I go through each of these 4 themes, I'm going to try and focus mainly on the mechanisms that make them real. So let me start with why. Start with the purpose of these organizations. So this is Walmart's stated purpose. You'll probably recognize it. It's sometimes abbreviated for consumer purposes to save money, live better. Asda now adopt the same statement in the UK. It is the corporate mission statement, but it's so much more than a mission statement, particularly the second half. Saving people money so they can live better. It shows that the impact you have when you're at Walmart is way beyond the boundaries of the store, but impact customers' lives. So when you've got a cause like that, you do go over and above what you would do if you were just doing a job. When you have a cause like that, you want it to be true forever. And the only way it can be true forever is if it's a sustainable model, and it needs to be profitable if it's to be sustainable. So in Walmart, when you have a conversation about cutting costs, you're actually having a conversation about lowering prices for customers. When you have a conversation about improving profitability, what you're talking about is ensuring that the organization can continue to deliver this great work forever. Now, whenever I, as CFO at Asda, Walmart, and Amazon, whenever I presented the company's numbers, the financial performance, I always started by putting up the company purpose. And that was because actually both organizations knew that it was only by delivering this purpose that there was any entitlement to grow sales or deliver profit. And actually, I think for commercial organizations, I think Walmart is exceptional in having real meaning behind their purpose. Actually, I think plenty of public sector organizations find that much easier to do, but for a commercial organization, Walmart is exceptional at that. Now, of course, Walmart has 2.5 million employees around the world. So having words like this isn't enough. They need a mechanism for ensuring that this purpose is applied day in, day out on the shop floor. So Walmart serve around the world over 200 million customers each week. That means there are more than 200 million interactions between an employee and a customer. So Walmart basically there's no rule book, is there, that could ever cover every situation that every employee is going to find. So you need to run a business like Walmart using values. So Walmart needs each employee to get the message that they individually own the customer experience, and that in each interaction, the company expects them to put the customer first. So Walmart has a slightly unusual mechanism for getting that message across. Their mechanism is called the chant. And in every Walmart store, every day, everywhere in the world, they do this chant. There's an equivalent one for Asda. But if you look at the last line on it, it's my Walmart, who's number one, the customer always. They chant that, and that's saying, it's my Walmart is saying, you, employee, you own this customer experience. And the second bit, who's number one, the customer always, is saying, we the company expect you to put the customer first in that experience. Amazon, on the other hand, also has a very bold and ambitious mission statement to be the Earth's most customer-centric company. Honestly, I don't necessarily think this is that unique, because I think there's lots of other organizations that will say they strive to satisfy customers. But what is unique in Amazon is that they have the mechanisms that sit beneath this to mean that actually they probably are the Earth's most customer-centric company. Now, some of those mechanisms will be about data and technology, but one of them that's particularly impactful across the organization is called the working backwards process. It's a way of ensuring that the customer is at the heart of all innovation and throughout the implementation of that innovation as well. So whenever there is a new initiative or idea within Amazon, it starts by somebody writing a press release. That is the press release that would, in theory, be published on the day that the initiative went live. It articulates what Amazon is going to do and why it is good for customers. It's then supported by a series of FAQs that are the how Amazon is going to do these things. That press release will be debated long and hard by senior leadership before any code is cut or before any financial modeling is done, to ensure that the plan for that initiative is truly good for customers. When it's finished, it's then handed over to software development teams and operational teams who always have it there, have it in mind, so that as they're doing their individual piece of the project, they know what the big picture is, they know what they're striving for. The working backwards process, incredibly important in keeping the customer at the center of innovation, both at the outset and through implementation. I might also just have a quick plug for JISC as well, because JISC also has a very ambitious vision that goes way beyond what JISC does. So JISC's vision is for the UK to be the most digitally advanced higher and further education and research nation in the world. Now, JISC, of course, also knows what it does in providing Janet, in buying on behalf of the sector and offering thought leadership. But its mission is much bigger than that. Its mission is to make the UK the best in the world. And JISC has a series of mechanisms themselves for ensuring they're staying close to the sector and listening to what their customers want. I mean, for example, JISC's board is made up mostly of university vice-chancellors and college principals, and each year JISC holds a stakeholder forum event for, I'm sure many of you have been involved in that, to listen to what universities and colleges, or what is on universities and colleges' mind. So moving on to the second theme, which is relentlessly listening to customers and building and retaining their trust. Now, I was reminded of this quote by Archie Norman, who led the turnaround of ASDA in the 90s. Now, I'm cheating a little bit here, because actually this was just before Walmart. Walmart took over in 99. But Archie observed that ASDA was failing, which in the early 90s it was. Dis-ASDA was the headline in The Sun. And he observed that ASDA was not a customer-focused organization and had introduced way too much bureaucracy. So he set the standard as every employee should be serving a customer or serve someone who does. Now, the impact of this was a mindset change, such that everybody, whatever role they were in, was focused on the end customer. And even if they were in a central support role, by focusing on the end customer, it made them more effective at serving their immediate customer. And this is one of the things that Archie talked about as being a key to the turnaround of ASDA. And actually, I suspect that there is some read-through from this to higher education, in that if you're providing technology services to a university, if you're focused on the end user, often the student or the researcher, then you'll probably do a better job of supporting your immediate customer, which might be another department within the university. But thinking about mechanisms that ensure that you keep the customer at the center of decision making. Both ASDA and Amazon, in any review that I attended, any weekly business review, monthly review, quarterly review, always starts by looking at the customer inputs. At ASDA, we would always talk about price, service, availability, queue lengths, complaints, way before we got on to talk about sales or costs or profit. Because we recognized, back to what I said earlier, that it's only by focusing on the purpose of serving customers that you're actually able to have any right to sales or profit growth. Of course, we looked at sales and profit too, but that was primarily to audit that we had in fact been focused on the right inputs. Same thing true at Amazon. It's all about the inputs. Secondly, techniques and tools that put the customer in control and enable them to self-serve. So, for example, at Amazon, if you place an order and you're not going to be in, you can say online what you would like the delivery driver to do with your parcel. Just a very easy way of the company satisfying what the customer wants. Customer reviews, obviously very well used, widely used on the web as a way of building trust from other customers. Customers trust what other customers think. Critical for organizations like Amazon, of course, is making sure that those reviews are genuine, and Amazon has taken action on that when there's been evidence to suggest otherwise. And then traditional things like listening to customers. At Asda and Walmart, we would go round about a dozen stores each week and listen to customers, listen to employees, and over the year you'd cover the entire estate and have a pretty good view as to whether you were doing a good job or not, and what was working and what wasn't working. At Amazon, we were all over contact center data, looking at trends, looking at where there were issues where we weren't satisfying customers. But when it comes to understanding from customers, and I think you can think of users as customers equally, things are moving on in terms of the techniques people are using to understand what users, customers will think about new initiatives. So traditionally, if we were going to launch a new system, a new service, a new product, we would have done market research. We would have asked customers what they think they would do if presented with a theoretical new product or new service. But you can see here just from Google Trends that over the last 10 years, people aren't searching for the term market research anymore, because the problem with that model is that it assumes that customers actually do what they say they're going to do. On the other hand, data analytics is following exactly the opposite trend. And the difference between data analytics and market research, of course, is that data analytics is the study of actual customer behavior, whereas market research is focused mainly on intended behavior. So this is driving many organizations, Amazon certainly in this category, to launch new initiatives in beta form, using a minimum viable product thinking, to get something out there quickly and enable them to learn from customers' actual usage and behavior. You could show you a similar chart for machine learning, which is an even later tick up on the graph. So moving on to the third theme of world-class execution. Now, insist on the higher standards is actually one of Amazon's core values. Walmart has something very similar. It's called strive for excellence. And when you've proven an idea, then you really need to go quickly to execute and execute well. Now, the first thing about world-class execution is what really helps is if you've got a simple business model. And both Amazon and Walmart have that. In both cases, it's a circle. And it's a circle because the harder you work on driving each of the components, the faster it turns around, and therefore the faster you grow. So Amazon starts with selection, having the selection customers want to buy. Then moving on to the customer experience, selling it at low prices, getting it to you very quickly, and that in turn drives traffic to the website. That traffic is then attractive to third-party sellers who come onto the site and in turn add more selection, enabling that to spin round. And of course, as it spins, the organization grows. And then the bit that comes out the top, as it grows, you can leverage costs, lower the cost structure, and therefore lower prices to customers, which further enhances the customer experience. That is the business model for Amazon. Walmart is actually very similar. It's also a circle: operate for less, buy for less, sell for less, grow sales, which leverages costs and enables you to reinvest in lowering prices. So a simple articulation of your business model really helps with execution. But it's necessary, but it's not enough. So thinking about execution of change in flight, how do you ensure that you keep the quality bar high? And this is challenging, you know, when you've got launch deadlines, when you've got budgets to hit, it's so tempting to compromise a little bit on the customer experience to get your new initiative, your new system launched. So one of the controls that Amazon puts in place is that on every project team, there is an independent project member who sits outside of the reporting line. The job of that customer experience bar raiser is to ensure that the bar stays high and that the project is delivered in line with that press release that I talked about earlier, and that there is no temptation to compromise that customer experience to hit launch dates or hit budgets. And it's not that Amazon doesn't trust leaders to do this. It's just human nature when you're in the middle of project execution. And this is something which I've spoken to a number of people about outside the organization. Seems to resonate, having an independent project board member to maintain that quality standard. Another example is something I talked a bit about earlier around the and-on chord. So at Amazon, within the customer service part of the operation, if we received more than a statistically significant number of contacts from customers about a product, the customer service agent would pull the and-on chord. And in fact, it happens in many cases automatically now. And as a result of that, Amazon would stop selling that product to customers until somebody had investigated and corrected the defect. And it might be a problem with the product, it could be a problem with the packaging, it could be a problem with the website presentation, such that people thought the product was going to be different to what it really was. So and-on chord, another great way of insisting on the higher standards and preserving quality. And a number of ways of working. I think I'll just talk about the first one on here. So as leaders, the metrics you choose to talk to set the tone for where the quality bar should be. So in some organizations, you might talk about performance using traditional SLA language. You might say, for example, product availability is 98.5%. And you might think, that's pretty good. 98.5 is quite a high number. That same metric at Amazon would be presented completely differently. It would be presented as what we called a DPMO, defects per million operations. So rather than focusing on the 98.5, Amazon would focus on the 1.5, except instead of making it a percentage, and therefore with the denominator of 100, they make the denominator 1,000,000. So suddenly, a performance that is 98.5% availability in Amazon would be presented as 15,000 DPMO, which is a high number and not as good, therefore, although of course it's exactly the same. But that encourages people to relentlessly focus on reducing it. I mean, 15,000 DPMO means that for every 1,000,000 parcels that Amazon delivers, there's 15,000 customers that would be dissatisfied. By the way, it's way lower than that, but that's just an illustration. So people will relentlessly work on chipping away at that number, and in doing so, improve the experience for customers. But it really just sets the bar super high in terms of what customers should expect. So finally, let me come to innovation and continuous reinvention on behalf of the customer. And my final Bezos quote is this one. Given a 10% chance of 100 times payoff, you should take the bet every time, but you're still going to be wrong 9 times out of 10. Now that is Amazon's approach to innovation. But of course you might think, well, that's easy for Amazon, where you're big enough to be able to do 100 things or 1,000 things and accept that 90% of them are going to fail. But if just a handful end up being stunning successes, then it's justified the innovation. But for me, this is where collaboration is so important, and where actually organizations like UCISA and JISC come in enabling you to spread that innovation effort to try more things and achieve more. And certainly from my experience at Amazon, success nearly always results from early failures. So some examples, Kindle, the very first Kindle was slated by the press, and it wasn't a particularly good device. Amazon could easily have given up at that point, but they didn't, and the second Kindle obviously ended up being the preeminent e-reading device in the world. Something like Amazon Web Services was initially considered to be a massive distraction for Amazon by analysts, but of course is now one of the leading cloud service providers. Amazon first launched the marketplace as something called Z Shops that was a standalone marketplace site, a bit like eBay, didn't work. But Amazon then put the third-party products on the same page as the Amazon retail product, and of course it was a great success. So the point here is that you kind of need to be prepared for failures in order to have successes. Now, if you don't like that, the problem is that change comes anyway. And I mean, just an example, if you were a physical media business, a bookshop, a music CD shop, a DVD rental business or something like that, then you have been disintermediated by people like those you see on the screen. And many of those companies were actually focused on each other rather than thinking about the digital innovation that was coming. I mean, it's a slight aside from this, but one of the organizations, not in education, that I support, took a very negative view about using the cloud to store information. And what they found is that their employees wanted to work remotely, wanted to do some work in the office, some at home, and they were just using their personal cloud accounts to store sensitive information. And now it's come to GDPR, etc. They're realizing that actually they let this happen because they didn't embrace corporate cloud solutions from the beginning. So my point here is change is happening, and you either choose to be at the forefront of it, or the likelihood is you'll be overtaken by it. I mentioned some of this already. Amazon's approach to innovation is about minimum viable product, getting something out there quickly to learn from customer actual behavior, and optimizing for learning in the early stage rather than necessarily what your sales or your costs are. And given the speed with which technology is moving, when Amazon does find a success from those tests, being able to move really quickly, which obviously hinges on agile principles, both from a software design perspective and from an organization structure perspective. And you may be familiar with the concept of 2 pizza teams. So the rule in Amazon is that if a team is bigger than can be fed by 2 extra large pizzas, then it is considered too large and needs to subdivide. It's a bit crude, but it is a very effective way actually of just ensuring that the organization remains agile. This is actually my favorite model that I learned at Amazon for supporting innovation. And it basically involves segmenting ideas between those that are one-way doors and two-way doors. So a one-way door is a big decision. Maybe it's an acquisition, maybe it's a major technology platform choice, but whatever it is, it has to be right, or there are serious consequences for the company. But there are actually very few decisions like that. The vast majority of opportunities and decisions are actually two-way doors. You can decide to test out most new initiatives, and if they don't work, you can stop them. Or even if they're permanent, the effect is probably not so significant that it's existential for the organization. So with a one-way door, it's absolutely right to spend an extreme amount of time going through the rigor of understanding every part of that decision to ensure that it is the right decision. And also ensuring that you have the most senior buy-in to that decision. But for most decisions, actually, you're far better off just trying it. Just do it. And I think that splitting decisions using this one-way doors, two-way doors model is a pretty effective mechanism for doing that. Now, actually, as a former CFO, I know that finance directors are really bad at this. Finance directors will want to make every decision a one-way door and want you to go through and show the business case. But sometimes that's appropriate, but very often, actually, you're much better off going quickly. Finally, we talked about investing in ideas, but I do think every bit as important as investing in people. That's obvious. Now, it might be slightly controversial to say this, given the audience, but I think today's workforce, whilst better educated than ever, is possibly not as well prepared for the transition to work than they have been in the past. They generally spend more time in formal education, for example. And when I combine that with the trends on automation and artificial intelligence, there is this emerging skills disconnect. Now, that disconnect is already very well articulated when it comes to STEM. And I'm sure, as technology teams, as many of you are, you'll be familiar with that challenge. But the other area where I think there is a gap is actually entrepreneurship. And funnily enough, I think in technology is really where entrepreneurship and technology come together. You see that in some of the most successful companies right now are entrepreneurial companies that use technology. And I think for your organizations, for your teams, the key thing will be making sure that you get not only the right technical skills, but also the entrepreneurial experience to be able to exploit that technology in pursuit of your customers and users. So tried to talk about these 4 themes, the value of a compelling purpose, the relentless focus on listening to customers and retaining their trust, executing to an incredibly high standard, and then finally having mechanisms to surface and nurture innovation. I've had a go at some read-through from that into higher and further education, but there may be others in the room who can help me with some of this. But I certainly feel like the piece about having a clear purpose, starting with why, applies to any organization. I think it's very easy in a support function to think about what you do, or maybe how you do it. But quite often, it's easy to forget about why you do it. So knowing what your strategic role in the greater vision for the institution, I think would be a very important takeaway from this. Secondly, when I talked about being focused on the end users, that turnaround at ASDA that was focused on getting everybody within the organization focused on the end user and working backwards from that on the basis that by being focused on the end user, you do a better job of supporting your immediate customer. Change management, so this is about maintaining the quality bar, whether it is inviting some independent project board members into your teams and project boards to play that role, representing the customer in ensuring there's no compromises, or however you do it, delivering quality, the quality bar alongside other change management disciplines, I think is a useful takeaway. And finally, probably almost the most important thing from this, and the relevance of why you're all here today, is the value in collaboration. There is a little bit of competition, of course, within the sector, but there is much more value in areas like technology and innovation from collaborating. And organizations like UCISA and JISC are key to making that happen. Okay, that's all I wanted to say, but I thought I'd open it up for questions. And I might, if there's questions on the relevance of what I've said for higher education, I might bring in some friends to help me with that discussion.
I'll start.
Thank you.
You talk about customer-centric. Would you regard students as customers?
Yes, absolutely, totally. There are different customer types. So I'd link this to my reference earlier to the Archie Norman quote about serve a customer or serve someone who does.
Yes.
So as technology teams, it may well be that your primary customer is somebody else within the hierarchy of the institution.
Yes.
But I feel very, very strongly that you should think, and I think this would be a JISC view as well, that you need to focus on ultimate needs of the end users, students and others.
And the relationship, because unlike Walmart or Amazon, it's not just a case of procure and go. There is more of a relationship that we require students to do things and be more in partnership with us than just consume our services. I mean, from an IT perspective, sometimes they are just directly consuming our services, but in terms of their learning experience, it's slightly different.
Yes, yes. So I've no doubt there are differences. I think you know in your sector that you will only grow as institutions by being focused on the changing needs of your users, of your customers, of students and others. And so for that reason, because that is true for you and it is true for a Walmart and an Amazon and any other consumer-facing business, I think the themes that I got to are relevant. So yeah, I mean,
I wouldn't disagree.
I definitely consider students customers, but you're right, they're more than just customers. It is a more complex relationship.
Yes. Yeah. Does anybody have any questions? Stunned silence.
Can you try that?
So Lawrence Cranfield. I was really interested in your one door, two door slide, and I could see in Asda that two door might be trialing it in one or two stores, and if it works, rolling it out. If it doesn't work, go back and rework the solution. How does that idea, or have you any thoughts on how that idea may transfer into the sort of higher education sector?
So I guess you've got various ways of segmenting the university population. You could look at individual institutions to test things, or you could look at courses across institutions, or you could literally just pick out samples of students from across the wider population. So I think there are always ways of de-risking, but it doesn't have to be by just selecting a reduced number of people. One other way of doing it is to launch a new initiative with limited functionality, so that you get you get to sense what the experience is and what the reaction from users is, without necessarily having to build all of the technology behind it. So, I mean, something like Prime Now within Amazon, we wanted to launch that really quickly. So we developed it as a standalone app, rather than making it part of the whole Amazon app and the Amazon website. So, that will, to some extent that's changed already and will change more over time, but at the time it was a way of getting something out there quickly and cheaply to test the reaction. Obviously the reaction was good in that case, so you then follow it up with more development.
Lisa Whelan, Dublin City University. I absolutely agree with you around the fact that students are our customers, but in terms of that within a university, I think that requires a mindset shift. Do you have any advice or ideas about how you might go around about making that change within the university in terms of that view of what our students are?
I think that is a critical leadership question. Ultimately, the vast majority of the university income comes from judgments based on a variety of things, but there's an increasing number of apparently objective measures, NSS, TEF, REF. So I would have thought, now I'm a trustee of GISC, but I'm not really in the sector, so I'm quite surprised by your question actually, because I would have thought that given the require, so much of the economic value in an institution comes from the number of students you have, that it would seem somewhat obvious to me that you would see the student as critical. Now, of course, some of that is in the marketing up front, so maybe you can get away with it if your marketing is good, but over time, it's always going to catch up with you if the experience doesn't match up with the promise up front. That's back to start with why. You promise customers you're going to offer them low prices, you actually need to offer them low prices or they will very quickly work that out. So all I can say is I think that's what should be coming through from leadership. And if it isn't coming through from leadership within HE, that surprises me.
Just come back to that.
Sorry.
Thank you. Peter Tinson from UCISA. I was just sort of going to answer the previous question a little bit. Certainly a number of universities are setting up innovation units with that idea of rapid failure, or try stuff and see what happens. And as part of that are engaging the customers in sort of exercises where they're almost bringing their own ideas to help shape that service. So I think you're seeing a shift now where there's greater involvement by students, by research staff, etc., in shaping their own experience. So I think that is starting to happen.
That's great, thank you.
Also, Paddy Day from Queen's University in Belfast. Basically, how long does it take to establish this type of cultural change, typically?
I don't know if there's a typical answer to that, because it's been there from the beginning. It's been led, in the case of Amazon, by a founder, well, in fact, in both Amazon and Walmart, in both cases, by a founder initially, the culture put in place. But, there's equally examples of organizations that have successfully transformed themselves. So I think you have to start small. So you look at opportunities to prove some of this thinking in individual departments, in individual institutions or whatever, and build from there. So I think you have to recognize it is going to take a long time, but nothing succeeds like success. And if you can test a few things, you find a winner and tell the story, then that's a fabulous way of evangelizing the value of this culture.
I suppose that picks up with a second question I have, is how do you deal with people who are resistant to change in this area? We may have a few of them in HE.
Yeah. So then you're talking really about culture. Split that into two things. So one, you've got a performance aspect to that. So people who simply do not buy into the vision for the organization and the values of the organization. Well, to be honest, there needs to be performance plans for that. It doesn't work to have people within the organization who are pointing in a different direction. But that's not all, I know that's not always easy, and there's some useful processes that you can go through to ensure that people do understand the reasons why the values are the values and why the culture are the culture. Going forwards, you can help it through hiring. So at Amazon, the only thing really we hired on were the values. They were called the leadership principles at Amazon, so that you only got new people coming into the organization who believed in the culture and the way of working. So I think you have to do it that way, but the most effective thing is the answer to your previous question, which is just evangelizing the value of this customer-centric change culture and how it does drive success.
Yeah, sorry, it's Ian Anderson, Coventry University, and I just wanted to link to that and something was on one of your slides, because I actually think that one of the things that we should be doing, and I don't think we're particularly effective at in the sector, is trying to get change through based on good data and information. And it was interesting that you put DMPO, was it DMPO, which I'd not seen from my Six Sigma days, where that was 3.4 failures, I think, per million. And I was having a conversation with a colleague of mine when we were driving up here about sort of where business analysis should go within the sector. And I think that the next quantitative leap is about changes being made on understanding of actually where the issues are, and that being driven by things like, you know, where your failures are and the issues that you have. And I think the sector doesn't quite, I think it's starting to happen, and I think in IT, it was interesting that, I think it was Sally last year gave a talk about making sure that with your service desk, that's a focal point for where you're interacting with your customers, and trying to understand what their needs, and using the people that sit there to absolutely facilitate your understanding of the issues that they're having and the things that they'll want going forward. You know, it's all about that old thing about, you know, if you're not keeping score, you're only practicing, really.
Yeah, yeah. So Amazon, as an organization, considers itself to be a truth-seeking organization, meaning that the default is that there should be an absolute right answer to any question, and that the data will give you that. Now, of course, there's still a role for judgment and gut feel, but at Amazon, you will always be pressed on, what does the data say? And the culture says you go 5 levels down into the data. You ask 5 whys to really understand what's going on. And an area where that does work especially well is with the customer contact center, where there is an enormous amount of data on what customers have said to us, whether it's a contact over the phone or through some other medium, or indeed it's in their behavior, so products that they've perhaps looked at and not bought, or taken out of their basket, or returned. You know, all of that data is incredibly valuable in enabling Amazon to do a better job of satisfying customers. I also think that the customer review type thinking is very valuable when it comes to engaging third parties. So if you've got a supplier to Amazon or a manufacturer of a product on Amazon, and that product has poor customer reviews, that manufacturer is incredibly incentivized to work out why those reviews are poor and fix it. I know, in the same way, maybe in institutions, if you've got third parties providing support to, or providing services directly to your users, then having your users provide feedback on the service provider is incredibly powerful for you in getting leverage over the service they provide. So I agree with what you said, and data is absolutely fundamental to the success of Amazon, and indeed the more we're using automation and artificial intelligence, the more important role data is going to play in satisfying customers.
Are there any other questions?
I'm glad you asked that. I like to talk about that, but I just thought about time. But yeah, so this comes back to being truth seekers. So believing there's an absolute right answer. And the problem with PowerPoint is that it's so tempting to be selective in what you're going to share. It's so tempting to be in sell mode. So Amazon bans PowerPoint virtually, internally. And the way of reviewing performance or plans is to review a Word document. It will be a very factual document. It will not contain lots of superlative adjectives about how good or bad performance was. It will be very factual as to what the numbers were. And Amazon believe that that approach leads to a better, more informed, more balanced decision than listening to what somebody's presented on a PowerPoint slide. It's back to being focused on data and the facts and looking objectively at situations.
I have another question. You talked about the workforce and the work skill being maybe better educated now, but less prepared for the workplace of business, and particularly around entrepreneurship. I just wondered if you had any thoughts as to how we might incubate or encourage entrepreneurship within our organisations.
Yeah, so I think the thing about entrepreneurship is that perhaps unlike some other topics, they are harder to teach in the same way. You learn to be an entrepreneur, but mainly through experience. I'm sure there's good books you can read, etc. But experience is super valuable when it comes to learning about entrepreneurship. So I think if there are ways of giving people an opportunity to safely test their entrepreneurship skills, which could be through some of the innovation we talked about. I mean, one of the other companies that I work with, sit on the board of, is called Venture Simulations Limited, where they have essentially a business game which enables people to learn about running a virtual business without the risk of anything going wrong. So it's things like that, ways in which you can give people the opportunity to learn through experience in a safe way.
And without the fear of failure.
Without the fear of failure, exactly. Yeah.
Okay. In that case, if there are no more questions, if we could just say thank you to Rob.
Thank you.